Hi, welcome to the Goblins Pockets, a D&D review podcast where we talk about all of the D&D content we have consumed and we tell you whether you should spend your hard-earned time and money on it. I'm Ian.
And I'm Monica.
Hey,
Hey.
and that's us, yeah.
That's us. How are you doing?
Well, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's so
Yeah.
warm here.
Oh, is it?
It's just boiling, guys.
It's miserable here.
Oh
I'm
no.
trying to think when this will have gone out. If this goes out on time, I'll have just had my birthday.
Happy
Um,
birthday.
Thank you. I'm getting it. I get every birthday. I get a new grey in my beard.
Is that the present that you get? You just
Yeah,
get a
probably.
new gray.
Well, this is it. Like this, I'll have to say if I got anything D&D related the week after next, but chances are not,
No.
because I forgot to ask for anything. But who knows? Yeah. But yeah, we for anyone listening, we tend to record these podcasts in batches anyway. So, who knows what's happened between this week and the last week? Does this week exist? Who knows? But yeah, on this week's episode, I'm going to be forcing my opinion down Monica's throat because we are going to review the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual. If you're on podcast, I'm currently holding the books up to the screen because these are books I own. I, Ian Mauld, who spends no money on anything ever, own these books.
Isn't this a statement in itself? You own these.
Now, here's the thing. Did I buy them in my naivety or did I buy them as useful things?
Were you just peer pressured into buying them?
Well, I played one game and then I became a dungeon master. So
you're like, fuck it. I want to be the one making the rules.
Yeah, well, it was more like, shit, how do I do this? I think. So I did a little bit of reading. I think, and then I think I bought all three of them at the same time. So I bought the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide. Would I do that again with the knowledge I have now, or if I was telling somebody new to D&D who was about to become a dungeon master, do they need all of those things? Maybe not. Maybe not all of them. I think the Player's Handbook is invaluable. I think the Monster Manual is inspirational and very useful for ideas. I mean, I didn't know what monsters existed in their entirety, and the Monster Manual's got like 200 plus monsters in it. So is it 300 monsters in it? It's useful. It's got a lot in there. Now the DM guide, right? Let's cut this. Let's make this episode two halves. So let's do the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then we'll do the Monster Manual. The Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yes. What is it? Why does one need to buy it?
The Dungeon Master Guide has all of the additional rules that are not in the Player Handbook. Some of these are optional rules, some are not. But it's more than anything, it's a resource or a reference guide for DMs. So it covers things like environment, what to do where, water combat, damaging objects, siege weapons, all of the additional stuff. Basically, I mean, mine is heavily tabbed.
I love a tabbed book.
And I've got my tabs here are towns, areas, like, so it's got a big section on things like desert environments and mountain environments and stuff like that. Adventure goals, downtime, items, objects and damage, and I've written DMT. What does that mean? Oh shit, yeah, the deck of many things. Specific for the deck of many things.
Have you used the deck of many things in your campaign?
I have used it in one of my campaigns.
You are chaotic.
Oh wow, it was one of my favorite games ever. And that sort of shit exists in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So a lot of the a lot of the stuff in it is help for DMs. Like it kind of says what it does on the front. Like a player does not need this book. If
Mm.
you're a player and you're listening to this, don't switch off because you might want a DM at some point. And I'm going to tell you whether you should buy this or not. I have literally read through it once. I've then forgotten 95% of the content I've written because it is a textbook. But it's actually quite a fun thing to just crack open every now and again as a DM and remind yourself on some things and refresh and find some stuff that you just didn't know about. Some of the optional rules are really interesting. But yeah, it's a good resource for world building, for creating campaigns. I think, the first section of the book is just telling you how to run a D&D game. Like it's very instructional. You don't have to follow everything that's in it. You don't. There's resources out there that you could find
Mm.
as alternatives, but there is a lot in there that's quite useful. Yeah, I'm talking myself back into buying it now.
Yeah, you're like, maybe I don't know if I would tell you to buy it. And it
Yeah,
seems to me that you have probably gotten a lot of use out of your
yeah. I
Dungeon Master's
think
Guide.
I think it's a bit like imagine it like like a maths textbook. You
Mm.
buy at school, you have this book and it's dry and it's a bit boring, but it gets you through the test, it gets you through the classes, and chances are you'll never open it again.
Yeah.
It's my least opened book,
Mm.
but that initial read through, that initial thing, and it it definitely gets you ready
Yeah.
for DMing. Um,
Would you say that it also gives you some inspiration? Because, like, for example, when you were reading the tabs on your
mhm.
on your book, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Like, I didn't even know that there was a whole category of text devoted to areas like
Yeah.
desert or to free time, like downtime, like how
Mhm.
players can spend downtime. Do you think it can also give you inspiration as a DM of all
Oh
the
yeah,
things that you can
definitely.
do?
Yeah, certainly. It's got loads of stuff that you might not think about, and you know, it yeah, it is useful, and it's more
Mm.
ideas. I mean, the thing about DMing is if you've got the me and my wife like to call it the confidence of a young man. So if you have the confidence of a young man, you probably wouldn't need it because you can homebrew everything, you can think about everything, you feel like you've got enough reference from all the different D&D content that's out in the world. You probably think you could make up most of it, but the fact is there's probably a rule for it in the DMG, like laser pistols. There's stats for it in the Dungeon Master Guide.
Oh,
Yeah,
I had no
great.
idea.
Yeah, exactly. Grenades. There's stats for it in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Like, there's all these. Like, there's a whole section dedicated to future weapons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's some stuff in there that you wouldn't know about, and there's things. There's lots of things about like alternative rules that are really cool. Like one of my favorite ones in there is a healing surge. Have you ever heard about a healing
No,
surge?
I did
Yeah,
not.
basically it's kind of, I can't remember, I think you do it as an action, but as an action you can spend up to a certain amount of your hit die in battle
Mm.
as like an adrenaline boost. I can't remember the
Yeah.
exact rules of it, and I've not used it in a campaign, but there are things like that you're like, oh shit, like, well, we haven't got a healer
That
in
would
the
be
group.
very useful for my
Yeah,
squishy sorcerer, I can tell you that.
yeah, exactly. But it's just it's full of little things like that, and there's all sorts in there, and the 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 mo the predominant section of it that I do use is the items section.
Mm,
So
okay.
all of these items that are just kind of common knowledge to most D&D players, things like a bag of holding, that's bullshit. That's from the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
So there's a massive section on items,
Yeah.
and there are tables that help you select items that would be
Yeah.
available and the rarity of them and all that sort of thing. So all of those stats that come from all these different places, and like you might be using different websites or apps. Most of it's coming from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So it's a great resource to browse through when you're like,
Mm,
oh, I need something for this next town, or I need something for this next campaign. Everything's gotten a bit samey. We're just going through the motions of in
mm.
this campaign. If you need to spice something up, there's probably something in the Dungeon Master's Guide for
That sounds really good. Does it
it.
also give you, in addition to like reference resources, like for example, items and,
Mm-hmm.
rules, does it also give you storyline things that you can use in your campaign? Like,
Not
I am,
not story. It tells you how to structure a story.
oh,
Like it
okay.
gives you ideas how to write a story, and it gives very brief examples. But Wizards of the Coast know what they're doing. There's books for like full on like
Yeah.
ideas. But there's I mean, let me just I'll go through a couple of like what the things are. There's running a game, so it starts with a world of your own. So there's world building, there's creating adventures, there's creating NPCs, environments, what to do between adventures, the treasure, like I mentioned. Then there's running the game, the work, Dungeon Master's Workshop, so how to create monsters from scratch. And then there's some random dungeons. So yeah, there are some bits. So there's like a starting area, some passages, chambers. Yeah, so there's some maps at the back as well. So there's some like I
Oh, that's really cool. Just
yeah,
some
so
maps that
some
you can
maps,
use.
so some examples of the sorts of
Yeah.
things that you'd need. It really is everything you need to start DMing. If you someone like me that went straight from um, playing like one game straight into it. If you've not watched like 600 hours of Matt Mercer being a DM, then the
I get
Dungeon
attacked.
Master is good. Oh no.
Yeah, and
um,
it's interesting that you say that, because the one thing that I read, as we were trying to prep this episode, I know nothing. I've been a
mm,
DM a grand total of like twice. Like I still have a lot to learn as a DM, and I actually
mm,
don't have I don't have a player's handbook, let alone a Dungeon Master's Guide. Um, One of the things that I read is that the fifth edition Dungeon Master's Guide seems to be different from previous editions, because it assumes that you don't have to be an experienced player to become a DM. So it
mm,
gives you all the information that you need to understand the system in one book. Whereas previous editions kind of assumed that, like, Gygax assumed that you would only become a dungeon master once you had become an experienced player, you've become inspired by someone, you had really understood how the system works, and then you only have the kind of additional informations that function for you as a DM rather than as a player.
yeah.
Instead, you were able to jump straight in,
Yeah,
basically.
and maybe that's it. Maybe I just take for granted the fact that I only played one game and then went straight to being a DM, and
Mm,
I had this book. So maybe that's just I'm a testament to the book. Maybe the book is has
yeah.
done me really well.
And you're not the only
Um,
one. One of my
mhm,
DMs, Mary, my best friend in the world, she played one game and
mhm,
became a DM because she had
yeah,
your experience of like, I want to make the story. And the
mhm,
DM guide probably allowed her to do this as much as it allowed you to just become creator, to
yeah,
weave the story,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Um, so I guess if I had to rate the Dungeon Master's Guide, um, I mean, now after talking it out loud, I'd probably stick it out more like a 16 or a 17. Um,
Okay.
I would say a 16 because
Oh, conservative.
one of my biggest drawbacks about Dungeons and Dragons as a whole is the unwillingness to put a gold value to magical items.
Mm,
There are brackets, so they will say that an uncommon item can cost between 1 and 500 gold pieces,
which
and
is a
then
wild range.
it's a massive range. Like if you're a player, like a level 1 player, you might earn a few gold after you might not be anywhere near 500 gold for your first like 3 levels.
Yeah.
And what suggests that you know is a bag of holding like I think it's an uncommon item or whatever. Yeah, like who fucking knows? Like,
Yeah.
and they should just put gold values to items based on power or what. I mean, it's nice that they leave it flexible for the DM, but even just giving a
A
suggested
smaller range,
an
like
RRP, a
yeah.
recommended retail price. That's what items need. And it's
Yeah.
completely then up to the DM to flex either
And
side of that.
isn't that what happens with like healing potions anyway? Like I've been a
No, they've
player and a healing potion has 50, it costs 50
yes,
gold
yeah, exactly.
for a standard healing potions. Yet you go to that tiny town with that like squirmy, stupid shopkeeper that sells it at 100 and you're like,
Yeah, you little shit
well,
bag.
come on. Like,
Yeah,
it's not like
exactly.
the DM can't up the retail price.
No, exactly. And the player's handbook, everything is priced accordingly. The DMG, nothing is priced accordingly. Like you've got no idea. So it just adds extra work in for the DM to think about that. And you've got everything you need in there to create encounters as well, which, oh my God, the maths to work out the experience that, you know, a party of 3 level 5 characters, a deadly encounter is this many experience, which is this many of these. Oh my God, fuck off. Like it's so hard to work out. And I can't say that there's a better, formula
System, yeah.
for this. But this is another point off of this game. It makes it quite difficult to work things out. There are also a few player classes in the DMG. So I think there's like War Cleric and the Naughty Paladin.
The Naughty Paladin.
The Oath
Is
Breaker.
it the name of the Naughty Paladin?
Yeah, they're actually from the DMG. So
Okay.
if you're playing, like, just buy them on D&D Beyond or whatever, or ask your DM to see
to
it.
give you the
Like
stats.
there are a couple of races as well, like skeletons and stuff like that.
Fun.
Zombies that you can play out of that. But yeah, it's decent.
So you would buy it as a
I
new
think I would.
DM.
I think I'd buy, unless, kind of as you said, if you are a player that has played for years and is then thinking about being a DM, and you've got a good example of a DM in one that you've worked with or multiples that you've worked with, and you've got a good idea of how to run a game anyway, you might not get a massive amount of value out of it. Try and buy it secondhand, try and borrow it from somebody. That's the other thing. I think if you're a party and then one person's like, oh, I want to have a go at DMing, just ask to borrow the book or have
someone's
access.
bound to have it.
Yeah,
At least one person in your party is bound.
But I think if you're jumping in super fresh, you've got a group of 5 or 6 of you, and you're like, let's play D&D, but we've never played before. We've watched like, then get a DM.
Yeah, invest in a DM guide.
It's like $30, £30, £25. It's one of these like €30. It's the standard book.
Standard cost.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for your insights. Okay. And I'm going to ask you all about your next book. But before, let's take a little break.
Yeah. Okay.
See you soon.
Hey, got an idea for something we should review? Or been thinking of buying something for your D&D collection but the price has put you off? Why not join our Patreon? For just £4 a month, you'll get a say on what content we review, and when we buy something using Patreon contributions, we'll raffle it off to our patrons. So, you'll be in with a chance of winning the thing you wanted us to review anyway. Good, right? So, go find us on Patreon at The Goblins Pockets. And of course, all new supporters get a shout out on the latest episode. Because we love you.
And we're back. Yeah, so in this 2-parter this week where I berate Monica with my knowledge of these nerd books.
Giving me all the information to become a perfect DM.
This is it. I think you'd be a great DM, and this might be useful information to you. So next up, the Monster Manual.
Look at that bad boy. Look at that beholder.
I've got some bits in here.
Some tabs there.
I've got some tabs, but these tabs are more campaign specific.
Okay.
These would just be, I need some ideas. So I'd have put a few in here. Now, the Monster Manual. So this all pretty much does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a book full of shitloads of monsters.
Okay. Is it just like a giant?
This is the contents page.
Okay. Okay.
There are no subheaders. It is literally just alphabetical
Ian
order.
just showed me a list full of tiny, tiny, tiny words.
Yeah,
it's a lot of them.
There's an introduction that says, this is quite interesting. I had a DM. I had a player become a DM, and I will, there was a lot of confusion about how to read a monster stat block. So, um,
How?
well, things like, how many actions can I do? How many of these things can I do? So when
Okay.
like, and the introduction of the monster manual goes into detail about how to read a monster stat block. It also talks to you about things like armor class and why certain monsters have an armor class like this and that. And it talks about uh, what the scale of tiny, medium, like tiny, small, medium, large, huge, all that sort of thing is. It goes through proficiency bonuses by challenge rating. So it's got everything you kind of need to build your own monsters is in that first 10 pages. And then it just launches into a barrage of monsters and lore.
Okay. Oh, so you have some lore included.
Oh yeah, all the lore is there for everything. So when you're looking at something, it tells you why it exists, where it comes from, what realm it's from, which plane it's from, all that sort of thing. And it does give
motivation.
It does, yeah. It does give you insight. And hands up, I am a DM that does not read these lore, and I should, and everyone should, I think. Because you can
That was brave of you to admit.
I know. I mean, so but you can go, oh, a displacer beast. That's cool. Like it's a cat with tentacles. Yeah, like let's throw one of those in. It's the right challenge rating. It's got roughly the sort of attacks that I want it to have to make this battle as challenging as this. But if you read about a displacer beast and its intent, it's kind of where it comes from, why it attacks, like you're going to have a better, more informed fight. So that's there, and that's something that's not always available when you go online and you're like displacer beast stat block and it pops up. You've got it there, it's available. That's what you need to run your combat for today. So this is, again, it's another book that's nice to pick up and read. It's really nice for ideas. So you're like, oh, what underwater creatures are there in D&D? So you flick through the book and you're like, oh, that's water, put a post-it note there. Flick through, oh, that one's water environment, put a thing there as well. This is something we talked about in Mordekainen's Monster of the Multiverse that they actually do really well, is that environment-based stuff that's not in the monster manual. I think
so there's no way you just have to flick through and find all of the water ones.
Mordekainen's is a much better format for monster books than the actual monster manual. If they reprinted the monster manual laid out more like that, it would be a better, when I come to rate this, I'll drop it because of things like that.
Again, like in my very brief experience in borrowing the DM's guide and the monster manual, I realized this very quickly. Like understanding, as a new DM, understanding what kind of creatures by challenge rating, by environment, by if, in my opinion, it makes sense for that beast to be there and attack someone. It was very difficult. Like it was a Sudoku worth of information that you had to figure out as you flicked through the book, rather than just having a very nice index at the end that tells you like, this is the challenge rating, this is the so we will talk about that probably more later in related to Mordekainen's. But how was your experience using it as a new DM?
I found it clunky. It's, like I said, it's great for that inspiration. If you're somebody new to D&D who knows that there are dragons in Dungeons and Dragons, and that's about it. There's people, there's some elves and dwarves and stuff, and there's dragons.
And dragons will probably kill everyone. So maybe not the best idea.
This is if you are completely fresh to it, you will have no idea about, what's the difference between a demon and a devil. This book will tell you. What's the like all the different colors of dragons and where they come from and what their characteristics are. You don't just throw any old dragon in and be like, it kills. Like theoretically, the way a gold dragon acts and the way a black dragon acts are very different. Their intent and their kind of, their motivation, super different. And the monster manual will teach you that. So again, it's not imperative. You don't absolutely need it, but you're going to have a more in-depth campaign and a better understanding if you do have it. You'll build a richer narrative with the monster manual.
Mm.
And it is just great for ideas. If you just need that thing, you're like, oh, I need that challenge rating 5 thing that fits this area. And like you'll look through this, you'll be there fucking ages because it's not ordered by those things, but you will find it
Yeah.
in theory. And
Probably.
yeah, maybe. And yeah, things like reading stat blocks, teaching you how to do that is it's important. So yeah, I mean, there's not much to be said about it. I mean, it is what it is. I'm just trying to see if there's anything useful near the back. I mean, there are all these kind of people at the back.
Mm-hmm.
So that the back section
People.
is, well, yeah, the back section is full of like commoners, thugs,
Ah.
bandits, priests, all these people, NPCs. So there's some useful stuff there. And wow, here's a kicker actually. Beasts.
Mhm.
So if you are a player who plays a what do you call it?
A
A
ranger,
druid, no, a druid or a ranger with, a companion.
companion, but yeah, Circle of the
Yeah,
Moon druid.
yeah, like a wild shape, and you want
Yeah,
something to wild shape into. There's loads in here. The whole back section is beasts. Well, no, it's not, but
it's a lot of them.
it's a lot of beasts, giant spiders and all that sort of thing. So again, it can be useful for that person. That's a bit annoying. I'm just trying to think. I think in the player's handbook there are beasts at the back of that as well, aren't there?
I think
Um,
so. I think
I
there are
think
some,
so.
but probably the monster guide or the monster manual, from what I
Yeah,
understood from other people talking about it, has more. Maybe like
yeah.
it just has a
There's
much more exhaustive list.
yeah. There's a lot, and I'm just trying to get to the front of it. Miscellaneous creatures is what it's under, but yeah, it's like apes, axe beaks, all these sorts of things. Um, and that is actually really useful for druids, rangers, anybody that has animal companions or requires an animal stat box. And I mean, if you're using D&D Beyond or using apps, there are probably things out there for you. But if you're not and you're new to the game and your DM has a monster manual and you're playing a druid, you might want to
Worth
ask to
using.
borrow it, like
Worth
during
using.
the session and things like that, or take photocopies or whatever.
And if I put you like back against the wall and I said, I'm a new DM, what do I buy? Monsters Guide or DM's Guide?
What, and you can only afford one.
Yes.
And if you've never played before, I would say DM's Guide, definitely. You can go out and find monsters all over the internet. Like there are free resources everywhere. I think we were talking about what do you call it, Roll20 last week.
Yes.
Roll20's
Yeah.
got loads of monster stat
A
blocks.
million. Yeah.
And there are loads of things out there. So, but the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, is more of a, like I said, it's like preparing yourself for a test. You read through it, you work through the sections. If you implement some of those sections as you're going, you will only become a richer, better DM.
Yeah.
The monster manual is more for,
if you have the confidence of a young man.
yeah, exactly.
You can use them and add them to your story, and that's it.
No, the monster manual is just there for inspiration and justified. Like justified, you definitely, because like I said, if you've never played D&D before, you won't know what a beholder is in theory. And this tells you what beholders are, where they come from, why they exist, their job in the world, or theoretically their job, and the stats for them. So it is useful, and it would be a difficult decision. I am glad I own both, definitely. And I think as I get ready to start this next campaign, I will get back into them both again. So I think they're great for refreshing your memory and making you really think about what to do. And we review content to say what you should spend your hard-earned money and time on, and these are some things worth spending your money and time on. Like if you're serious about D&D, I wouldn't go and buy them before you've ever played. Like use the basic rule set, buy a starter set or an essential kit or something like that and run it out of there. There's plenty in there to be going. But once I like D&D, I want to play this seriously, and I'm going to get into a campaign that is going to span a period of time. These 2 books are useful.
And they're the foundation, right? They're the foundation of everything. You can homebrew, you can create things from your own mind, but these will probably give you the basics that you need.
If you're digitally inclined, these 2 would, I don't have them on D&D Beyond, and I've not seen them, but I can almost guarantee that they're better on D&D Beyond because of the ability to quick reference things and hotlink and hyperlink and jump around. That does not exist in the books.
The
Monsters Manual. So if I had to rate the Monster Manual, it's probably going to be, I'm going to say a 13. I've got to put it lower than Dungeon Master, again, because it's got some massive faults that they have addressed, and they have the capability of addressing, as they've just proven in Mordekainen's Monsters of the Multiverse. Like, that book is a much better way of laying out monsters and giving more insight into what's useful in what instances. So they could do it if they reprinted this book. I'd get the reprint. Definitely. Well, I wouldn't spend money. I already own it.
But you already own it. But as a new player, as a new
DM. But again, as references, because they are reference tools. They're both reference tools with images and text accompanying things. I'd get them on D&D Beyond. I think, like, even me right now, like, I can't bring myself to do it because I already own them.
You already own them. You already have them.
My 60 quid on them or whatever. They exist. I've got them. But if somebody could say right now, you could trade those 2 books, and I'll give you a D&D Beyond account with those 2 books, I'd do it. Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of my review of the Dungeon Masters and the Monster Manual. Yeah, that's my little mini DM episode.
Yeah, it's really good because I think, we review content for players, we review content for listeners or people who just in general like to consume D&D content. But this is specifically for, maybe one of you out there is toying with the idea of, or thinking of maybe starting to DM. This is your sign from the universe. Do it. You can use these resources. You can do it without if you want, and, just try it out because it is fun. Even as someone who hasn't done it a lot, it's fun to use all of the resources that Dungeons and Dragons offers to, create your own story and, throw some monsters at people. That's fun.
The Dungeon Master's Manual, as I've just said, the Dungeon Master's Guide, I do not know everything that's in that book.
Yeah, exactly.
But I know where to find some of it, and I know what it covers. And that's the whole point. If you're thinking about becoming a DM, these 2 books are really useful. You can do it. Anyone can do it. And you don't need to know everything that's in them. But they are useful.
And something that I know is silly, but it's worth mentioning is you have a party that probably will be able to help you with some of these things. Like, you're not alone against a number of players. This is a cooperative game. So, use the DM's guide, but also don't be afraid to say, I have no idea what the difference between restrained and grappled is. Let me look, or do any of you guys know? You're all playing together, and you can combine the resources both that you have, like we've discussed with books that you may possess, the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, but also with resources that you have in your mind. You all have different experiences. So sharing is caring.
Yeah. And my ratings for me are, what was it, a 14 and a 13? That's pretty high. These are useful books.
I think you said a 16. No? Maybe you didn't? No, 14. 14. 14.
Yeah.
14, yes.
If you've got the money, buy them. If you're thinking about becoming a DM, if you're already a DM and you feel like you're a bit stuck in a rut, they're also useful for that. They are useful books. So I hope that was helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Ian, for imparting your wisdom on us. And
of course.
We will see you very soon. But in the meantime, follow us on Instagram at the Goblins Pockets.
And do ask us questions. Come follow us.
Ask us questions.
Like, we're always there to answer them. So
tell us what you want us to review. Email us at thegoblinspodcats@gmail.com with any thoughts or queries or doubts that you have. We're always happy to hear from you guys, and become a Patreon so that we can start reviewing some more content for you guys.
We can buy fancy things and tell you how good they are.
Yeah, or bad, but we hope good.
Yeah, and then we'll give them back to you, because that's what we
Yeah,
do for our Patreons.
that's what we do.
We raffle off anything that we buy that we physically can give to you. So yeah.
Ian is a minimalist. He has nothing.
I don't want this crap. I just need to have it. So,
And we will see you next time. Thank you for joining
take care.
us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.